The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Good morning, everyone. I, Arjun Arora, take it as my utmost honor and privilege to extend a hearty welcome on behalf of School of Law to the Faculty Development Program on Innovative Teaching and Research Methods in Law from 10th to 14th of January 2022. I now invite convener, Faculty Development Program, Dr. Mohammad Tariq Intizar Sir, Associate Professor, GD Goenka University, to address the gathering and give us an introduction to the event. Sir, please.
Thank you, Arjun. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Registrar, GD Goenka University, guest and participant. The School of Law of the GD Goenka University, Gurgaon, Haryana is going to start today a 5-day faculty development program that is from 10 to 14 January 2022 on innovative teaching and research matter for the faculty, professionals, scholars, and PG students. This FDP is spread across 6 sessions, each dealing with a vibrant topic. The major themes of the FDP includes outcome-based teaching and learning methods, case law methods of teaching and case-based research, using new technologies for teaching and multidisciplinary research, qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method approaches, developing a strong research proposal, writing to get funded project, preparing legal research paper for high impact factor journals such as like Scopus Index journals. This FDP is an endeavor to deeply enrich the knowledge of all the participants and would be immensely beneficial, and the session will be delivered by the eminent speakers from India and abroad. There is a special announcement for the active participant. After the last session of day 5, that is on Friday, January 14, 2022, you will all get a Google form for a quiz session, and on the basis of that, our FDP organizing committee will choose 3 winners for the active prizes and certificates. Thank you, Vice Chancellor, sir. Once again, I welcome all and express my gratitude to them for making it a success. Looking forward to an enthusiastic response from your participants. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I will now request Professor Dr. Tabrez Ahmed Sir, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, GD Goenka University and Dean School of Law, to address the gathering. Sir, please.
Thank you, Arjun. Let me also thank all the participants from all over the country, and also let me congratulate the School of Law for organizing the excellent program on innovative teaching and legal research. You know very well that this area is very important and also very relevant to all the faculty, whether teaching in the schools, universities, or colleges. And also we are moving towards the new education policy implementation program. It becomes more relevant. And also what we have seen last 2 years, we are having the pandemics, and we have drastically changed the teaching learning pattern. That's why the FDP is very important to change ourselves and become more relevant, to have better student engagements, better value addition and outcome. If we see the growth of the industry sector, because I'm the strong believer of the education for employment, and unless and until we produce the very relevant employable graduates, we can be failing in the process. So that's why we have to understand the educational growth, industrial growth, and then see that whether we are ready for that or not. Let me congratulate the entire team for FDP for putting a very important sessions and inviting very eminent speakers who are well known in their field and also proven their ability in the area of higher education. I'm sure with the participation of this FDP, you'll be able to raise your capacity and become more creative, innovative teacher and also researcher. In fact, the way market has grown, if you talk about the growth in terms of the industry, it started from the industry 1.0, where the focus was the shifting from the horsepower to the mechanical power, because before this period, that is the talking about the 1760, to 1901. In this period, mostly the production pattern of industry was depending on the horsepower. So before 1760, it was the horsepower, and then 1760 to 1901, we started using the mechanical power of the production of the goods and services. And that's why once we shifted from horsepower to the mechanical power, the lot of changes required for the training and learning process for the students. And then we have seen the industry 2.0, which is started from 1900 to 1970, where the mass production by use of the assembly lines by the electricity started. So we use electricity only from 1900, and then till 1970, we are depending on electricity by assembly line, and production was there. Then we have the 1970, where we started developing the electronics, and then automation started by the mechatronics and all. Then we have up to 1995, we are depending on the IT and electronics, that is the industry 3.0. But from 1995, we are in the era of industry 4.0, where the focus is more on the automation, and then use a lot of multimedia in the classroom. We have seen the internet coming in India in 1995. Now the question is that whether we are also synced to the industry 3.0, because our teaching learning process, our education system should satisfy the norms of industry 3.0. Accordingly, also now we have seen the industry 4.0 from 1995 onwards, and now into the 2020 we have seen the 5G technology. And in the industry 4.0, we have the connectivity is the main target. By connectivity, by the main target, then we have the smart technologies, we have cloud computing, we have big data, network machines, and we have the AI machine learning. So a lot of AI is used in the process of imparting the education in the process. So now already in the era of industry 4.0, industry 4.0 will not wait whether the education system is reached to education 4.0 or not, because everybody wants a lot of easiness, lot of easygoing process for the access of the education, and it is a natural process to grow. Now our duty as an academician is that we have to also change our education in terms of the education 4.0. And also we have to develop our capacities. All the faculty should develop their capacity to imparting the education 4.0, because already we in the industry 4.0. In the education 1.0, there were lecture method and memorization pattern was there, and then we have to see the teacher was the only source for information. So teacher imparting knowledge to the students. And then we have seen the education 2.0, where the internet enabled learning started. So from 1995, we have seen the growth of education 2.0, where the internet and multimedia came into force for helping the faculty to impart the value addition or quality of the learning resources. And then we have seen teacher imparting knowledge to the student and student to student. So in 1.0 is faculty to student. In 2.0, we have teacher to student and student to student. But in 3.0, we have seen the consuming knowledge production, where the faculty to student, student to student, and student to faculty, where we started the concept of flip classes, where the student can also be engaged in the imparting the knowledge. But now already in the area 4.0, in the 4.0, the education should be very innovative, and it should be very creative, and it should be out of box, non-traditional education by use of MOOCs, SWAYAM platform, self-learning process, and augmented reality, virtual reality, and problem-solving ability. Now the question is that whether each faculty is fully ready for education 4.0, or where our curriculum is designed properly to provide the education 4.0. Because in education 4.0, we have certain parameters to meet. Then we'll be able to satisfy and produce the employable graduates. As per the records, we say that 60% outcomes from the universities and colleges, the 60% pass outs are not employable. And industry always claims that our faulty pattern of the teaching learning process, and we are not focusing on employability aspects. We are not focusing on what industry requires. That's why 60% pass outs are not employable. And again, because of the AI intervention in this process, we are further seeing the non-suitability of the pass outs. And we are also worried that because of the AI, lot of jobs will not be in the market. But again, thanks to AI, because of AI, there will be more jobs in the market. So it means that those are the kind of the optional, those options available for the employment will not be able because they're not suited. And then on those places, there are new kind of employees are required. Whether those kind of new employees are relevant, whether suited to the market is a big question mark. And also let us see the growth, what happened to the IT front. Because in 1967, we have seen for the first time the internet came in the form of for the research purposes. And then again, after that, we have seen internet in 1980s was used for the purpose of research. And in 1995, we have seen the internet used for the purpose of kind of the trade and commerce. We have unseated model of e-commerce 1996. And then again, now the internet is more relevant, kind of the importing education. And in fact, in pandemic, we realized that the only survival will be through the internet in online mode. And we have seen the power of social media, we have seen power of internet, and we could survive because of the internet. It means that the solution lies in that we have to be fully ready for the market. And so see the mobile front, 1G started in 1980, where we have only just communication by the mobile phone. In 1990, we have 2G technology came, and 2G, we are able to call somebody and also use the messaging. If you use the messaging in 1990s, we have the pager technology. By pager, anybody can just do messages. And then we have 3G came in 2000. In the 3G, at least we started the video streaming, and it was very slow, so could not fully realize the power of the computing technology, power of the internet and mobile technology. But in 2010, when came the 4G, by 4G technology, we were able to use the multimedia and also the fast streaming of videos, where in 5-minute time, 1 hour video can be downloaded. But in 2020, we have the 5G. That is the great breakthrough happening in the mobile technology. And because of the 5G technology, everything is fast changing. And now we can have the autonomous cars. We can see the very fast data flow. And because of the 5G, now data is new oil. Now everybody behind the data. But before that, we used to say that anybody has iron and ore, maybe steel, oil and gas, maybe petroleum will be the market leader. But from 2020, it is very clear that now now we have the knowledge economy, and now data is new oil. Anybody who has the data, that will be the market leader. And we have seen how India government last year, when there was aggression in the border of the India-China, India government has gone ahead and closed 200 applications of China. You can ask question, how the closing 200 application of China is relevant to aggression on the border? Yes, because these 200 Chinese applications, they used to collect data, and then they know everything about us, and this information can be shared to the Chinese government, and government can use this against our interest. So that's why there's so much link between the education, employment, as well as the data generation, data protection. And because of the 5G technology, now there's too much data flow. And in that case, there will be now in 5G, there is in 4G, there is a one-way data communication, but in 5G, there is two-way data communication. In 1G, every 7 kilometers, there is a tower. In 5G, there is a 250 meters. At every 250 meters, there is an access point. It means that because of this particular technology, we are able to have autonomous cars, and we have a lot of fast data flow, and a 1 hour video can be downloaded in just 5 seconds. So this is the kind of the beauty of the communication we are running right now. And now the question is that, are we fully ready for this kind of development happen? And when we can really utilize the benefit of this technology. So I was discussing about the education 4.0. There are 9 areas that we have to explore in education 4.0. It means that every education can be anywhere and everywhere. So access is very, very easy now, because in our time, earlier days in education 1.0, the only source of information was the classroom, and you are bound to attend the classes. Whatever teacher was teaching, that is the only source of information. But right now, because of education 4.0, education is anywhere and everywhere. You can easily access by social media or by the internet or by by different resources on WhatsApp and other resources. You have the remote access software, we have online journals. Now, flexible delivery of the education. Now, delivery is very, very easy to flexible, because today itself we are having this webinar in the online mode. It's very easy. I'm communicating a lot of people sitting at different places. So very easy to communicate this particular kind of information. And also there's a personalized learning. Now everybody has ability to learn at the personalized level of learning. You can decide which program you want to attend, which you cannot attend, and then you can learn as per your kind of choice of learning. So we have personalized learning. We have the learning more easy by peers and mentors. So peers and mentors are also the great learning support. In earlier days, we used to learn mostly from the teacher in the classroom, but now we are learning more from peers and mentors. There is a practical application. So we have to not only just impart the knowledge, we have to also showcase the practical applications of the knowledge. If there is no practical application of the knowledge, that knowledge may not be very accurate and suitable. We have modular and project-based learning. So we, even in Education 4.0, we are saying there's a live project learning. So we have to engage the student. If you talk about the legal education, we have to teach them through the kind of Lok Adalas. We can teach them through kind of moot courts. We can teach them through the ADR mediation. We can teach them through the MUN, the parliament and all. So there are a lot of utilization of the online live projects with the project-based learning. And now the students should take the ownership of the learning. So learning should not be just one-way process. The students also have the kind of liberty to decide what they want to learn. And once the student will be able to decide and they will take the ownership for learning, it will become very easy process, because if they own something, they'll be feeling very happy to go for the learning. Now we are saying that we will not only examine the student, but they should be evaluated. So examination is not the new motto for the learning, whether learning happened, not happened. It should depend on the kind of evaluated. So examination is a very kind of strict process, but we have to evaluate the student. And evaluation is one of the very important skill in the outcome-based teaching learning process, that how to evaluate the student and find out that what was the learning happening. Because in the outcome-based model, every faculty, they have to be very clear, starting from the university vision, then university mission. Then we have the program outcome very well defined. Then we have course outcomes defined. Even program specific outcomes are also defined, that somebody after passing out the next 5 years, how he is going to be relevant in the market. So outcome-based education is very important. And then we have to evaluate that what we decided for them to learn, how much learning happened and where is the gap. And then gap should be fulfilled by some other processes. We must appreciate also the involvement of the Bloom's taxonomy in the learning process, that from lower order thinking to the higher order thinking. Because we must thank the Benjamin Bloom in 1956. He has given the great concept of kind of the learning standards. He was great supporter of the idea that we have to make them learn from a lower order thinking to a higher order thinking. And he has given 6 levels. So actually, as per the Bloom's taxonomy, it was because came in 1956 when there is no relevance of mobile technology, online education or internet was there. So in 1990s, we have some of the students of the Bloom, Benjamin Bloom, they have given Bloom's Plus, and they have given the Bloom's taxonomy in addition to the IT. So as per the latest trend of the Bloom's taxonomy, it has 6 levels, starting from the remembering. So we have to first level of standard of the learning should happen, that students should be able to remember something. And then once they will remember, they will also try to understand that whether they're able to understand or not. Once they understand, they have to apply that knowledge. So they have to remember something, they have to understand that thing, and they have to apply that knowledge in practical situations. So once this remembering, understanding, applying is coming in the lower order thinking. Now in the higher education, At school level, if you're teaching at school level, at first 3 level, if you're able to achieve, it is fine. That student are remembering some knowledge, they understand and they apply. But if you're in higher education, you must ensure that they have to also achieve the higher order thinking. That next 3 levels, that is 4, 5, 6. So fourth is analyzing. They're able to analyze in information, that is knowledge. They're able to evaluate that knowledge, and also they're able to create new knowledge. So now the creation is one of the very important aspect that the students are able to create something. And if you see our new education policy, it is focusing a lot on the creativity and innovation. Because unless until in higher education, somebody is able to create something and do innovations, we are not successful. So creating something, that creativity should be there. It must be very creative and must be very innovative. So now highest skill is creating and innovating. So this is the focus area for new education policy. We thank the government for bringing out the kind of the education policy 3.0, because first education policy after independence, it came in the era of 1968. Then the second we have seen in 1986. And then the minor reform happened in 1992. Now in 2020, we have seen this new education policy 3.0. So this new education policy focusing a lot on the is focusing a lot about the creativity and innovation. But before going to the new education policy, let me also further analyze the Bloom's taxonomy, that these has 6 levels. And at each level, I said remembering is the first level of knowledge. At remembering, remembering can be happen for something factual. Then next level is that remembering should be for conceptual knowledge. So you have to remember certain concepts. You have to remember certain procedure. So first level is factual knowledge, second is conceptual knowledge, third is procedural knowledge, and fourth is metacognitive knowledge. So at each level, these are 6 levels. At level number 1, there are 4 sub-levels: factual, conceptual, procedural, metacognitive. Again, that somebody has remembered something, now he has to understand that thing. Even for understanding, he has the factual understanding, conceptual understanding, procedural understanding, and metacognitive understanding. Same way he has to apply that knowledge. Even for applying that, once he is applying the knowledge, he should know how to apply the factual knowledge. He should know that how he is going to apply the conceptual knowledge. He should know that how he is going to apply the procedural knowledge. He should know that how he is going to apply the metacognitive knowledge. Again, at third level, that is fourth level, sorry, analyzing. So students should know that how to analyze the factual knowledge, how to analyze the conceptual knowledge, how to analyze the procedural knowledge, and how to analyze the metacognitive knowledge. Again, at fifth level, they should know how to evaluate a factual knowledge. If any factual knowledge is there, they should be able to evaluate whether that fact is correct, not correct. They should be able to evaluate the conceptual knowledge. If some concepts is there, they have to evaluate whether concept is okay, concept is not okay, it is relevant, not relevant. They should be able to evaluate the procedural knowledge. They should be able to understand whether this procedure is good or not good or bad. Then they have to evaluate the metacognitive knowledge, whether it is really metacognitive or not. Then the last thing is creating. So they are able to create a factual knowledge, they are able to create a conceptual knowledge, they are able to create procedural knowledge, and they are able to create a metacognitive knowledge. So these are the 6 level of the level of thinking, starting from initial level to complex level. And it has, each step has 4 kind of sub levels: factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. So I think each faculty must be able to include all these aspects when they're going to decide the course plan. In addition to that, you have to also find out the outcome-based model, where you are able to decide whether what you are going to teach, it should start from the university vision, mission, and then it should have the graduate attributes plus program outcome, program specific outcome, and course outcome. And then you should know how to evaluate and find out the gap analysis. And with some gap is there, you should have some strategy to fill up those gaps. So now this is the status right now, but I'm very thankful to the Government of India for bringing out the new education policy 3.0, it is focusing a lot on creativity and innovation. And then this education policy already implemented last year, on 31st July, and this in the last to last year, in fact, in 2020, and 31st July 2021, government celebrated 1 year for new education policy. Now it is lying on us because government can only make the policy. Now it's our duty to implement those policy. So implementation process is very important. In that aspect, the program like this, FDP, is very important, where we can come together and discuss how we are going to implement this kind of policy. And we are in the university system where the faculty is the leader of the class, faculty is the owner of the curriculum, faculty has liberty to decide. They can propose to POS, it may go to academic council, and we'll be able to make the changes and make it more relevant. Also, in education 4.0, there is a 5 I's are very important. So I must expect all the participants to must focus a lot on the 5 I's. So first I is imbibing. So you have to imbibe the education. What you are teaching the student, they must imbibe that knowledge. And second thing is that they have to iterate that knowledge. They should be able to interact with you, and they should be able to discuss and decide and debate. Third thing is that they are able to interpret the knowledge. So third I is interpretation. The students are able to interpret the knowledge. Fourth I is that they are able to have some interest. You are able to generate the interest in the student. That is 4I. And fifth I is that innovate. They are able to innovate something. So I'm sure if you're able to maintain first 4, that imbibing, iterating, interpreting, interest generation plus innovation, it will be great kind of value addition. Now, what is the role of the universities in the new educational context? Now, our role is that we have to develop a curriculum and pedagogy that is more suited for the education 4.0, relevant to industry 4.0, and satisfying the norms of new education policy. Now, we have to focus a lot on the research, that they are able to do some research, because only a good researcher can be a good teacher. So you should also do a research and innovate in your area of interest, and that value you can add in the classroom. Next is that faculty buildup. So our role is that as a university, as a vice chancellor, as a dean, we have to also create a good faculty pool and give them a lot of liberty and autonomy to decide their curriculum, decide their pedagogy, decide the kind of the learning they want to impart in the classroom, decide the kind of evaluation pattern, give them autonomy, liberty. So in this case, the student and faculty will interact. They will bring out a lot of value addition. We have to go for partnerships because each university may not be having all the parameters. So universities and colleges can collaborate. We have to collaborate the university with the industry, because if we want to produce the industry relevant graduates, we have to collaborate with the industry, and then industry will tell us and provide them live projects, provide them internships. So it will be more suited and testing that what we are imparting in the classroom, whether really suited to the industry requirement or not. We have to go for infrastructure. So we used to say that brick and mortar is the infra for the classroom. But right now, brick and mortar will not work. We have to go for IT infrastructure. In 2020, in the education 4.0, industry 4.0, and because of NEP, now we have to build up a lot on the IT infrastructure. We have to create very good IT infrastructure. We have to go for kind of remote access software, online journals. We have to build up a lot, because now AI and cloud computing is going to be the future for education system. And that's why we have to start increasing this thing. And also UCS said, even 40% learning can happen in the kind of online mode. We have to go for governance and leadership. So we have to govern properly and lead the education sector. We have to be a kind of thought leaders to go for the innovation and creativity. And also funding will be a big issue. So in the funding aspect, already now come back to kind of new education policy, because in the first education policy in 1968, the government was promised that they're going to invest 6% of GDP. And then again in the 1986, in the new education policy 2.0, the government again promised to expand the GDP by 6%, but even till now, it was not possible because when the first education policy came in 1968, we have Chinese aggression, we have the Pakistani aggression later on, and then we have seen the lot of problem happen in the country. And government, instead of investing more in the education, they invested more in the defense for the country. And even till now, we have seen highest investment is 2.7% of GDP. So 6% was never realized. What was decided in 1968, even till now, it could not possible. Even government again said in the new education policy 3.0 that they're going to invest 6% because the current gross enrollment is just 27%. So it was 26% in 1918 when the new policy was framed. Now it is hardly kind of 27%, but government's target is that to reach to 50% by 2040. So in the next 18 years, we are expecting the almost doubling of the current student in the market. So if the current students are a few crores, we are going to have few more crores in just next 18 years. But the question is that whether our infra is ready. We have required number of colleges, universities, those who are able to provide the quality of the knowledge to the student. It means that a lot of scope is there. If you're bright faculty, the lot of good scope is there. And also in the new education policy, government is opening India for foreign universities. So any top 100 universities, they can open campus in the country and they'll be able to provide the quality knowledge. I am sure when the campus will be opening, they'll be definitely trying to approach good faculty, relevant faculty. And in that context, if anybody is having the good knowledge, good expertise, they are more relevant. Now we can see also the education 5.0. So that is the future of the education, because in the current scenario, what we are doing, we are mostly imparting the knowledge for certification. We have strict criteria, and then we certify in that scenario, and we provide the kind of knowledge to the student. But education 4.0 is education for academic intelligence. So in the next 50 years, maybe after 50 years, we'll be seeing the era of education 5.0, where there is no certification is required, no fixed syllabus is required. The student will be going for academic intelligence. So they'll be doing a course as per their own interest, as per their own liberty to learn something. And there's no certification is there. There's no credit course is there. It will be non-credit courses, and it will be open learning only for academic intelligence. That is the education for 5.0. So that is the future. Already in our new education policy, government has given certain scope to grow in that direction. So I'm very happy to share that our new education policy is very great document, comparable to the best in the world. In fact, we know very well that Finland is one of the best country in the world for education policy, best education policy or education infrastructure, education model. And they are investing around 7% of education of the GDP on education sector. But India is still lagging behind. We are hardly invested 2.7%. And also, if you see the kind of expenditure, it is hardly 10% of expenditure of total expenditure on education. But government is trying to go for 20%. Let us see, the time will tell. But due to pandemic, even government invested just hardly 1.7% of GDP in the education sector. So now we have to face these kind of challenges. Funding is great challenge, where also I see the lot of scope for private group to grow. Because when we are saying we are going to double the student strength by 2040, and government is investment very less in the education sector, it means that now investment will come from private sector. So privatization of the education in the country is the real kind of really happening. And if you see globally, if you see the foreign good universities, whether Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, all are private. So private group will grow, private group will excel, because the way population is growing, the gross enrollment rate will grow. Only private group can satisfy the requirement, and they have great chance to excel and provide the excellence. With these few words, I thank you all for attending this program. I am sure this will be great value addition to your knowledge, capacity building, and excelling yourself in teaching and research. Thank you all. Now, if anybody has question, he can ask at the end of the session. Will be available for the Q&A at the end of this session. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir. I would now like to invite Professor Dr. Azim Khan Patan, sir, Head of Department, School of Law, GD Goenka University, to address the gathering. Sir, please.
Thank you, Arjun. And very good morning to one and all, Honorable Vice Chancellor. Indeed, this is one of the important platforms for all the participants, especially in this background of faculty development program on innovative teaching and research method in law. Rightly pointed out by our Honorable Vice Chancellor sir in his address, context of this new education policy, and then more specifically how we have to proceed ahead for education 4.0 and then 5.0 as well. In the context of this Bloom taxonomy as well, outcome-based education, which is one of the important core idea of outcome-based education. And it is very important for students, especially in this legal field, to have creation right from your understanding, right from remembering, understanding, applying the knowledge, then analysis of the knowledge, then creation of the knowledge, evaluation of the knowledge, and then creation of the knowledge. But in this entire process, at the same time, when we are talking about legal education, when we are talking about context of legal education in the first century, we have seen how in 1961 we have brought this Advocate Act, and then more specifically in the Advocate Act, this legal profession and emphasizing upon more specific. It was some or the other way, diluted in 1971, at a later stage, and then how exactly later it was organized, and then, Justice Venkateswaraya has given certain important tools when the committee that the Justice Venkateswaraya, how exactly this should be itself, more practical and pragmatic approach. In that context, obviously, in 2004 and then, in 2008 we have seen legal education, how, not exactly exhaustive, information has come, but we have seen how clinical subjects were introduced, how exactly arbitration, more specifically professional ethics, area, and then besides that, tertiary these particular aspects to provide a practical exposure to the student. But at the same time, there was also, important thought behind this process that students, indeed, they should think like a lawyer. Graduates, they should think like a lawyer. That was the very basic important ideology upon all this kind of development. When they are coming out of this entire process of theory from the law school, they should think like that was one of the important basic idea which was was behind these all important updates, legal curriculum, tools which was adopted by all of us. But when we go ahead, when we are talking about in the context of think like lawyer, but now important thing is there in this legal education, more specifically in curriculum development, should think how exactly, a critical thinking, which is one of the important, ladder or all important, we can say, the stages, right, from understanding, then analysis, remembering, understanding, analysis, then more specifically, evaluation, creation. Beyond this, there is yet another, and it has also been, accepted and adopted by the exam group as well, that some or the other way, over this entire process of 6 stages, critical thinking is also very, very important. Obviously, this entire critical thinking is also based on, these all kinds of 6 levels that has been, propounded by Melzani group. But one important thing is there, this critical thinking, how it can be developed, how exactly, different kinds of perspective based on non-formal arguments, how exactly formal perspective to build important logical reasoning for problem solutions, how it can be developed based on different perspectives. Either it may be incorporated in the course curriculum or in a dialogue and delivery of the course curriculum with the help of interdisciplinary approach present in this 21st century. Because we have seen that law now entered in almost every domain, or we can say every domain of every discipline law has entered, and it is vice versa as well, that every other perspective, every other discipline's knowledge is also becoming very important for solving many legal problems. Even we have seen in the context of, this social media or this, cybercrime, cyberspace, artificial intelligence, this nothing but these new trends of this 21st century. We are also saying that now law or legal system is also growing based on the growth of technology. In that context, we have also seen how new perspective that has also come into existence. So in that context, we have to also imbibe in our teaching, in our research, critical approach based on interdisciplinary knowledge or interdisciplinarity. How it will happen? Now we have to see how exactly from other disciplines, like from economic discipline, from sociological, the background, from even, the psychological background, how new kind of, interpretation we can bring it will be helpful, in collaboration in the legal system, in the legal law, even for formulation of new solutions. Like we can see, and I remember, when we are talking in the context of, our legal education, our innovative teaching and research method, if you see carefully, other disciplines' knowledge can, provide a more and more impetus for development of the legal education, development of the legal research, development of our teaching pedagogy as well. I will tell you, we were last time working in the context of or in the background of this, economic recession, and more specifically how, GDP, not only, of our country, all over the world in the background of this COVID-19. I'm talking about interdisciplinary approach. How it can help in critical evaluation of a particular issue or problem. Now I'm talking in the context of, more specifically in the background of this COVID-19, we have to have many reformative measures in our legal policies, in our legal education, benefit analysis of this law-making process as well, can it also go, based on this virtual platform, so that if you see the cost benefit of this entire, the process, law-making process, based on the economic analysis of law-making process, means the interdisciplinary approach in the law-making. If you see in economy, if you will bring that particular measures, if you bring, then you will find that some of the other way new solutions. It is similarly, applicable with other disciplines as well. Like we were talking about this gross domestic, GDP of the country. So, with the help of law-making process now, if you see carefully, when law-making process happens, as far as concerned into our, parliament or different legislative body or different, we can say, legislative assembly, you will surprise to know that for 1 minute, for conduction of 1 minute parliamentary session, the cost of parliamentary session is 8 lakh rupees. So for entire day, for running this session, cost of parliamentary session is 20 crore rupees. And again, repeating this, 20 crore rupees, including 500 and odd parliamentary members, their remuneration, their conveyance, their, the residence, their security, their flight, their telephone of that particular day, that charge, their allowance of food. So including these all important, different heads, the ultimate, the 1 day session, the parliament for lawmaking, it is having 20 crore rupees. So we are also proposing a new kind of solution based on critical approach, based on interdisciplinary approach in this legal research, in this legal education, that can it go cost benefit based analysis, this lawmaking process virtually. Out of this entire, the 1 month session, can at least 7-day session go on this virtual platform, so that some or the other way, the GDP or some or the other way cost benefit analysis based on that, certain, we can say, saving of the exchequer will also become reality. So we have to see and we have to think that how in legal research, based on critical approach, how, in even teaching as well, teaching learning process as well, how we can bring a new approach from other perspectives. How it has happened continuously, and it is continuously happening as well in the legal education, in the teaching and learning process. But can we, categorically provide down the line in the classroom these kinds of experiences to the students? Can we bring that, how to think? And as our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir as well has stated that how we have to think beyond or out of box for the knowledge creation. So in that context, we have to also find out that how other disciplines can provide new solutions in the existing, the legal system, or it may be any other disciplines as well. Now, to your surprise, even the humanity or human right-based jurisprudence can also make a growth, critically in existing legal framework. With critical approach, with critical thinking, or more specifically with interdisciplinary approach. You must have come across recently. I'm not exactly going in the background of Supreme Court, the judgment, but I will just highlight this one important observation. In case Puddaswamy, one important legal proposition has come. As a legal researcher, as a teacher, you have to play ultimately with those legal propositions to analyze for bringing certain important new knowledge, new solution. So, case Puddaswamy, in this particular case, you must have observed that Justice Chandrachud has given only one important legal proposition. That was in the context of freedom of conscience is also one of the important facets of human right and right to privacy. So humanity-based knowledge that has the birth. So I'm telling you, a critical thinking based on this particular, the legal proposition which has been propounded, if critically, if it will be evaluated, you will come to know that we will get a new kind of solutions for coming time as well, for not only India, but entire world as well. I'm telling you at this juncture. How we are continuously talking and we are continuously, facing the issue of this, more specifically terrorism, more specifically this communalism. I'm going to tell you this one important proposition which was propounded in one important judicial pronouncement like case Puttasammy, where it has been stated more specifically that freedom of conscience is also birthright right from the birth. So now the question comes, are critical thinking or more specifically interdisciplinary knowledge based, critical evaluation will give a new insight which can solve the entire world's problem based on this one particular, the statement, legal proposition. Because here it has been stated that freedom of conscience is birthright. Now the question comes, how even my parent as well can, impose their ideology or their philosophy right from the childhood. Why not the state? It becomes the responsibility of the state and state instrumentality to provide you all religions, philosophy, teaching and preaching of all religions, one religion to the child, and make it grow in his wisdom, and when he or she attend the majority, then she can choose any thought, any belief. That will be the freedom of conscience. That will be the reality of freedom of conscience as a birthright. So, for solving any problem of the society, critical evaluation, critical thinking, and other disciplines knowledge that has to be also looked into, and that is also applicable in legal education and legal research. So, with this, I will not go much ahead. I will, rest my discussion, and definitely we will be having questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. With this, we now come to the end of the inaugural ceremony.
Arjun, we can also have Q&A session. If anybody any query, we can give them chance to speak. Yeah.
All right, sir. I was just wanting to formally conclude the inaugural session, followed by which we'll have the Q&A as per you.
Okay, it's fine.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. We now come to the end of the inaugural ceremony for the Faculty Development Program on Innovative Teaching and Research Methods in Law. We are looking forward to constructive days ahead. Thank you all for being a part of the ceremony and attending and giving us your precious time. We wish you all good luck.
Thank you.
So we can now move forward with the Q&A.
We can remove the banner on the screen. Then, yeah. So now floor is open for Q&A. Anybody, any query? Now you are liberty to ask, please. You can write in chat box. Also, you can write directly to us. I think I was talking about that liberty of the faculty, kind of autonomy to discuss and debate and interact. So we should let us develop the culture of interacting and also not agreeing for everything. Better to share also your thoughts, your ideas about the teaching, learning, innovations, and creativity. So I expect there's some questions maybe there in the mind of the participants. Arjun, you can read the, if any question is there on the screen, chat box, you can also read, or they can also ask directly.
Yes.
May I ask the question?
Yeah, you can also on your video.
Okay. So video, so I just have undergone eye surgery. So, sir, please
okay.
forgive me
Yeah,
for
no
the specs, sir.
Yeah.
So my question is relating to this, that if we are non-IT faculty, for example, so how we can ensure the proper usage of AI, sir?
Okay, very good question, Dakshita. I think now it is one of the important skill each faculty must have. They have to imbibe the skill of also IT kind of awareness, no IT usage, IT skill. So now each teacher must also have inbuilt IT skill. Okay, so if anybody is not having IT skill, how to operate the social media, how to operate the Google, how to use the remote access software, how to use the online journals, then he is not suited for the faculty position right now. So anybody who is not having, they have to improve. And also even the Braille is coming in the area of IT. That earlier we had the Braille books for the people who are blind. They can use Braille books for learning. Even there are a lot of softwares coming up. Even the Braille for Braille book system, there is a keyboard where all the even blind people can use the keyboard just like the blind, and they can also operate the computers. So AI will be great support. So I think it's one of the inbuilt skill everybody must have. They have to learn to become successful.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Dashita.
Sir, am I permitted to ask a question if I have your permission?
Yeah, please, Arjun. Yeah.
All right. Sir, like you said when you were addressing us, I am also a strong believer in the fact that we should be moving forward towards project-based learning, and essentially the part where we are focusing more on having activities for checking the practical knowledge of students. However, in the later segment of your address, you had said that there is, the importance of imbibing the things that you are learning is also very important. So, sir, I have observed this trend where there are, people who actually go through activities, go through a lot of projects, but the sense of imbibing that particular knowledge is not there. So, say
Yeah.
for example, if that project is going towards an end, but that knowledge is not used practically or used in the most efficient manner ahead. So according to you, how exactly with that that concept of imbibing that particular knowledge be applicable in project based learning, to be very specific?
A very good question, Arjun. You are really asked very good question. I'm very happy that you think on these lines. In fact, in the education 2.0, we had started already the concept of project-based learning. But now we are in the era of education 4.0, where we believe there should be live projects. So in your question, instead of earlier you used to do just write a project and submit. Now I'm saying live projects. It means that you should be given a project live, that you go for internship. During the internship, you're doing a project. That somebody has gone to a police station and one person is writing a project on FIR, is a project-based learning, but I'm saying live project learning. So he has gone to police station and seen how the really FIRs are filed and how the officer who is appointed as the investigation officer, how he investigates the kind of particular case and how he submit the charge sheet. Okay, and then how the case has gone to the court and how the proceeding started. So now we are moving from just a project-based learning to a live project-based learning in education 4.0. Same way, you are supposed to go to attend the lawyer's chamber and see how the lawyer is talking to the client, how the case is taken by the client, how they fix the kind of the fee and all, and how they're going to file beside the jurisdiction. The client will come with the kind of some facts, and lawyer will filter from the fact whether case is a criminal case or civil case, whether case will go to district court or high court, Supreme Court, or whether case will go to kind of any other particular tribunal, or he should not take the case. Very important point, that sometime if you're a good lawyer, you should not take the case. You tell the client that after investing so much money, you will be only getting harassed, your money will be wasted, but you will not be getting justice because your case is very, very weak. Or if you get some kind of damages, it will be so much small that you will be wasting too much money to get very small damages. So better not to file the case because you are losing time, money than to file the case. So that's why this cannot be done in a classroom. Now this is possible only in a live projects. So that's why the internships and also the live projects where you go to the field and understand during the process, and that will get imbibing in your personality. If you do by sitting in a classroom or by sitting in a house, do a project and submit, it cannot be imbibed. It once you go and see live, and also you'll get chance to have your own view whether it was happening properly. Even you can be a better lawyer than your senior, or you can do a better kind of counseling to the lawyer to the client than your senior. Or if you are a judge, you can be a better judge because you have different perspective of analyzing the case. So imbibing is that you should be going now live. Then earlier in the education 2.0, it was having physically. But the question is that whether it is really possible, because right now there are 50,000 colleges are there who are imparting the law knowledge. And then if you see there are hardly 500 good law firms, okay, and very limited good lawyers. Whether really everybody will be getting to chance to see all these things live, unless we do kind of filtering and also closing those law schools who are just by the namesake providing the law degree. Same way, if you talk about the schools, even in the pandemic, hardly 30% universities were running online or able to impart the knowledge. And those students who have the gadgets, who have the internet connection, who has kind of understanding, those teachers who can impart the knowledge online, or a student who knows that how to utilize the Google Meet or Zoom, or use the social media for getting the education, it means that 70% learning was not happening. Out of 30% who are also online, some are closed their video, some are just by namesake, just log in and also close the video, they're doing something else. So my point is that we have to ensure the engagement of the student. Faculty should be very sincere and serious. And then unless they imbibe what they're teaching, they're not going to any benefit. Okay. Just for namesake, we should not teach. We have to see that what we are teaching, it is 100% imbibing to the student. It will reflect in there maybe an evaluation process. That's why I said we should not examine now, we should evaluate. Evaluation is a bigger aspect because we're evaluating the entire personality of the student. It should reflect from the capacity they build up after your teaching learning process.
Thank you so much, sir. I believe we have a question from Amaresh sir. Sir, you can go ahead. So we cannot hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes, Dr. Amresh.
Okay. Very good morning, sir. My question is, in media studies, when our students go to media houses and they do research for stories, they face trouble while doing statutory research. So what is your advice for that?
Very good point. In fact, I'm a great believer that even all the people who are working in the media industry, they should get a law degree. Because if you see the reporting for the legal issues, always it is very faulty. And because any case or any particular incident will be reported by the media, and sometimes they do not understand the kind of seriousness of the case, or sometimes they do media trial. And because the media trial, it is going to become a kind of a serious issue for the clients, for the defendants, even for judiciary. Sometimes because of the media pressure, judge may be under serious pressure to decide the case. So that's why all the students who are studying the media courses or journalism, mass communication, they should have very clear-cut understanding about the legal process, legal kind of the doctrines, okay, basic law. I think we have to keep one paper for all the budding journalists or the mass com people or electronic media people to understand the basics, because even 40% law is in the media always. If you read paper seriously, if you listen news seriously, you'll be going to have 40% loss coming in this scenario. That's why the reporting of the cases in terms of the legal cases is very, very important. And that's why what you can do, you can also try to send them for some internship for one semester or sometime or 1 month during summer or winter to some lawyer or some courts to see that how the basic things are happening. They will learn the process while we will be reporting the cases. they will be able to report properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Sir, we'd be proceeding with the last question for the session as of now. We have to move forward with the first session of the FDP. So, sir, Zikra Zabeen, sir, they're asking, sir, I want to ask how rural students can continue their studies during the pandemic, as a lot of hurdles have been faced in using internet for them.
Very good question, because also this raises the further question of the whether right to IT, the human right or fundamental right, not. Already, I think it is in debate. But I am a strong believer. I'm selling from 1995. Even the right to internet, right to access to technology should be part of the human rights and fundamental rights. So definitely those students who are in rural areas, around 70%, even 70% students who are in the rural areas, they could not learn anything during pandemic because of the lack of the proper IT support, lack of the kind of inbuilt infrastructure, lack of the awareness of the teacher and the student and all. So it's a very serious matter, and then that's why government is very important. So government should think properly, seriously, and provide all these infra to rural areas, so as the learning will not suffer. When you talk about the education 4.0, where a lot of use of the IT, remote access software, and the government is saying 40% learning can be online mode, then in that scenario, how the rural universities and colleges, schools will be able to get benefit and realize the real power of the social media, unless they have the gadgets, they have the networking, they have the proper communication and training. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. For people who have more questions, I'd be dropping the official
Thank you, sir,
email
for
ID.
giving me my answer, sir.
For people who have questions ahead, we'll be dropping the email ID in the chat box. You can, email us your questions, and we'll go back, and the faculty members will definitely reach out and reply to those questions. Thank you so much for being a part of the ceremony and the Q&A. We hope you have, constructive days ahead. Thank you.
হ্যালো, হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ বলো। আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, তাহলে তুমি একটু